Before we get into this week's show, I want to give you the 3 challenges for the month of June. Please know that these are not sponsors, but just friends that we support, so helping them helps us. The first challenge is to go watch Dead Drift on Amazon Prime. You don't need to be an Amazon Prime member to watch Dead Drift, so please go watch it, then come back and post in the comments what you think. Our second challenge for the month of June is to go try Glenmorangie Quinta Raban 12-year and let us know what you think. If you are in Western Washington, it is available at Louis G's in Fife. So go take a few sips, then post in the comments what you think. We want to hear from you on this. The third and final challenge for the month of June is to go to thewhiskeypeople.com for all your whiskey education needs. No matter if you want to be a server at a restaurant that knows what they're talking about, a bartender extraordinaire, an entrepreneur starting your own distillery, or just a whiskey snob that needs to know more. This is the place to get your education and become a true whiskey nerd. Now, on with the show. Welcome to another episode of Nerds Drink Whiskey. We are here at Louis G's in Fife. In previous weeks, we tried the Old Polney 12 as well as the Glenmorangie 12, and we highly recommend you come by Louis G's, give those a try, and post in the comments what you think of them. This week, Treacy picked out a whiskey from their bar, Woodford Reserve, and the whole point of this, we've reviewed this before, but this time what we're doing is one thing I've never been able to wrap my head around, and I still honestly, maybe he can convince me otherwise, but I think the tasting notes is at least 50% BS. I think it's basically distillers trying to sell it and whiskey snobs trying to make people think that they know more than they really do. So he's going to try and convince me otherwise, and he's going to try and show us how to really look for and find those whiskey notes. So, Treacy, if we were to name this episode, would you call it Learning About Tasting Notes?
I call it The Language of Whiskey.
The Language of Whiskey. Okay, so that's the name of this episode, The Language of Whiskey. And we're letting you have as much control as you possibly want.
Okay. We have Woodford Reserve here. All right. Most of your viewers understand what Woodford Reserve is, and if they don't, they should go out and find at least an airplane-sized bottle and give it a try.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a smooth bourbon. Okay. I'm not going to say anything more about that, other than we're going to use your words and define what and how those arrive. First thing about the language of whiskey is to use words that you know. All right. If you have had candy corn at Halloween, that's a good word. Okay. If you've had apples, if you've had turpentine in your nose, if you've had different odors that you can recall, I mean, those are all valid words. We're also going to try to say that the distillers and the snob community tends to use words that maybe you don't know, maybe to provoke your curiosity, right? And then you're stuck wondering, what was that? Because you never had stone fruit or what was that berry? Snozzberry.
Snozzberry.
Right. So, I tend to tell people that you need to open your mind and refresh it. If you're a food person, okay, then you understand what lemon peel or orange rind is, and you understand that's a citrus thing, but citrus in itself isn't just a good descriptor. Lean toward lime, lemon, orange. Be more specific as you can. When I say sweet, well, that can be caramel, it could be honey, it could be toffee, it could be brown sugar, it could be molasses. That's a huge spectrum of sweet, so be more specific. But we've had and know what those all taste like, right? Mm-hmm. So in each of these zones, okay, there's variations, all right? And I tend to use a zone as something familiar. There are tasting wheels, okay? And they try to say, hey, this is going to taste like cereal. Well, are we talking Lucky Charms? Or are we talking oatmeal? I mean, so again, being specific to the real world that we come from, all right? And that most of us all come from. Now, when we taste whiskey, sometimes we're missing half of the experience. We're missing it for a couple of reasons. The wine culture generally came before the whiskey culture, and many people tend to try to sniff their whiskey before they drink it. Something is very different about whiskey. Whiskey is a high spirit. That means it's very volatile, and it can numb your ability to taste because it numbs your ability to smell. Okay? When you have something that's that volatile, you're anesthetizing what's called your olfactory orb, okay, which is the bundle of nerves at the back of your nose that tells you what smells good. We only taste 7 things, okay? Bitter, sweet, salt. Okay? When we say sweet, remember those varieties I just mentioned? Mm-hmm. Well, it's not our tongue that tells us whether it's molasses or caramel. That's our nose. Okay? One of the distiller's tricks that's really fun, just to demonstrate the point, is if you hold your nose and taste a whiskey, right? You're not going to taste but a few things. We're going to actually do that, okay? And then we're going to do it a different method. So what I want you to do right now is to hold your nose and just taste the whiskey, and then we'll use what words we can. All right? Hold your nose.
Okay.
All right? Now, by the way, this is no comment on Woodford Reserve. Taste. And you let go. Did you notice that you didn't taste anything until you opened your nose?
Yep.
And then you
There's
only get
some spiciness, maybe?
Oh, I'm not going to use the words yet because we've really got a better method.
I actually did taste a little bit of wine, and I know some words you don't want to use, but I did taste at least the sweetness.
Absolutely, the sweetness is there. Again, that's the general area. But when you talk about the banana almond on the back of this thing, you're not going to get that while you're holding your nose.
No.
Okay. Now, if you sniff your whiskey and then drank it, you're subjecting yourself to half of that experience. Okay. Now, one of the things about whiskey is that it's best experienced at body temperature. Okay. I'm not interested in holding a shot between my legs for a half an hour before I drink it. So there's got to be a shortcut. The other thing that you'd learn from Scotch is sometimes an eyedropper will loosen it up with water, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't carry an eyedropper around, so there's got to be a shortcut. Now, with what I just showed you involving the nose versus the mouth, I'm not going to ask you to snort the whiskey, even if you put an eyedropper of water in it and held it between your legs for 30 minutes. That's not the tasting method. But there is a way where you can hold it in your mouth and exhale very slowly, assuming you've got enough air, and then fully experience the mix of vapors after it's warmed up in your mouth to 98.6, and your saliva is activated, and you have water, and then you exhale. Okay, so I want you to watch me, and then you're going to do what I do. It's called whiskey yoga, all right? No posing. And then what you want to do is, again, inhale. You're going to hold the inhale just slightly, and then only as you're exhaling do you actually start sipping the whiskey. Okay? Take a watch. Now you've all seen my whiskey face. I'm embarrassed.
Now I noticed that you didn't do your big inhale until after you had swallowed.
No, I've been swishing it around in my mouth. I'm really glad you brought that up. I had not swallowed.
Yeah.
I'm just swishing it around to make sure that it really gets as much surface area in the mouth. And that way it also warms up quicker. All right? And then I inhaled, and then only as I exhaled did I start actually swallowing.
Okay. And now, when you say swish it around, people have to...
Not like mouthwash.
I was going to say, just not like mouthwash.
Lightly.
But very lightly swish it around.
Yeah, very lightly.
And the idea again is to sit there and actually take a deep breath in, and then on the exhale, take your shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And kind of in a trickle as opposed to...
Yeah.
Okay.
Got
I'll watch you guys do it.
Okay.
Okay. As I do it too, because I like it. How much more flavor did you get?
A lot of flavor.
I didn't notice the difference.
Mark's had enough.
So Dan, being you noticed tremendous change in flavors or amount of flavor, give me the keywords now that you're thinking about what you've had.
Tingling, buttery, spicy. I think those are the ones that come to mind immediately. Maybe some vapory. Gosh, it's hard to try to think of the words now to describe it. Just heat. Flavors are more difficult, I think, for me to quantify than feelings, as it were, because I noticed not necessarily a lot more flavor as much as a lot more sensation. There were a lot more things going on.
Okay.
Like versus holding the nose, or even just the way I'm used to drinking whiskey. So yeah, there was a lot more going on, and that was kind of cool. But definitely, I think buttery, maybe a little spicy, and some tingling.
Gabe, what do you think?
Honestly, I think pleasantly warm, really spicy. I did like that. I like that. I like that kind of bite, that little bit of burn to it. That's always pleasant to me, especially in bourbons. And I'd honestly say, yeah, just a little bit fruity as well. Just on the tail end, just ever so slightly on the exhale, I could almost feel it being just a little bit fruity and nice to me.
Mark, what were the flavors you tasted?
Well, the initial taste was like a lot of whiskey. I quite often, it's kind of like a hint of pancake syrup.
Yeah.
And then the finish is, I gotta say, the finish on this is kind of like a weak mouthwash. That's pretty much all I noticed.
Okay. And the words I use on the fruitiness more specifically is more of a banana almond, and that comes from the rye element. Okay. And Woodford Reserve is good about not being too corny, right? As far as a bourbon goes, and balancing that off.
And by corny, you mean heavy on the corn mash?
Heavy on the corn element of the syrup,
right.
Yeah, and the candy corn flavor that typically follows. I mean, if you had an E.H. Taylor bourbon, by contrast, that's the really corny, syrupy end of the spectrum.
Speaking of which,
good middle. Okay, but again, the Woodford Reserve is a local whiskey. It runs something like $50 to $60 a bottle, if you know how to get it. And so it's my go-to as far as bourbons on an airplane. So.
Okay. Now, a couple of questions I have about tasting notes. Number one, there's been many, many times where wine tasters, there have been some sommeliers who have lost their careers, lost their reputation because they did a blind taste test and pretty much were found that a lot of the stuff they were talking about tasting notes and that was complete and utter BS. So my question is what would you say, what percentage of tasting notes that people, whether they're a sommelier, an expert, or had some schooling kind of behind them to get their tasting notes down, or just a common person trying to duplicate that, trying to copy that, what percentage of that would you say are people talking out their backside?
Well, it's not about people talking out their backside. I'm going to point out that you and I tasted this very differently. We tasted the Glenmorangie very differently because we're different people.
Okay.
I'm having a different day than you are today. We have different food points of reference. Okay, just generally genetics also. Okay, those three elements, amongst others, can really affect how a whiskey tastes. I've got some very fine whiskeys I won't ever have but 1/2 ounce a day of, and those are the ones that are fun because I come home one day, it tastes great, but differently than it did 2 days before. And so that's just an issue of mood, okay? I always go back to, when I cook, how I cook as to how I experience. Much of what we see expressed in concrete, common language is going to be 2/3 accurate for all of us, okay? And I'll say that's because we may be in the same mood as the master distiller when they tasted it and gave you the notes. But what's funny is that here we are, having 2 episodes previous from Scotland, right? How many of you guys have ever had blood sausage? Right, and yet that's one of their food references, okay? Haggis. You're never going to see that in the label of a Scotch bottle, but you got to understand that they have different food references. Mm-hmm. So what they think tastes good in comparison to haggis, right? Could be a bigger spectrum of food than this, right? So the language of whiskey is about the flavors we know and understanding that it comes individually as opposed to an absolute word meaning the same thing to everybody, or a flavor that at the time it was tasted really is broadly accepted by everybody, especially if they don't taste whiskey all the time. If you have a beer drinker, the flavor references are going to be very different than a wine drinker. Okay? That's another example. So it's about context. Are the labels accurate for everybody? No. Are they attempting in earnest to make them accurate with what they can? Sure. But we're not educating the consumer as to how to interpret the labels and what to expect. And that's part of what my organization is doing, is we're trying to educate the consumer of whiskey as opposed to letting a distiller just use their language. We say, hey, listen, you have to know your own language.
Okay. Now, there's been other tricks that you can see on different YouTube channels. Even though you should never watch any whiskey podcast but Nerds Drink Whiskey. But some of these other shows have different, and some of them have sommeliers on their cast and on their staff, and they have different tricks as to how to approach picking up those tasting notes a little better. One that I saw is he kind of dipped just a little bit in his hands, switch around, and then kind of do that. That way you're not overpowering those olfactory senses, but you are getting just a hint of them. What other do you know? What other methods would you recommend, or if any, of how to other ways to maybe get those tasting notes out?
Well, again, I discussed the more traditional methods earlier, which is make sure you're not putting it on ice. Okay, then you're dulling all the possible notes. Okay, somehow make it a little warmer, you'll get more of the notes. And then adding that dropper of water loosens up the esters, these molecules that are more tightly bound otherwise while in the bottle, and that can bring forth some of the more citrus and fruity notes that otherwise are lost if you have a tight whiskey. Okay, the method that you described is all about hand washing. And if you didn't wash your hands, it's going to taste differently to somebody than somebody who just used Purell, for example. I mean, so there's too many variables to argue that method.
How much perfume is in the silk you use?
Right.
Yeah.
And again, it assumes you have a nose. Okay, and then we're talking about tasting. So I think you're saying I want to nose it first and then see how it tastes. And you might want to try doing both at the same time, given the previously demonstrated method.
Okay, cool. All right. So any closing? Well, I think one thing we need to say is if people are in the Western Washington area and you want to learn more about whiskey, if you're going to be a bartender, if you're going to be a distiller, I don't know, I'm not sure what other professions, but if you work in the alcohol industry at all, and you want to learn more about it and be better at your job, go to thewhiskeypeople.com.
Well, and I'd like to say the regular common man or woman would want to go there as much more so.
Yeah.
Our mission is really to improve the public experience. And yes, we can talk about servers and how they serve and how they might tell a story with what they serve or be knowledgeable, but I really feel that this is an individual experience and that people need to take the time to study whiskey as opposed to just experimenting without any intent of learning.
Okay. And a lot of your events are on Sundays.
Yep.
In Lacey.
First Sunday of every month at the Yet disclosed whiskey education center, as I like to call it.
Okay.
But given liquor control board laws, I'm going to tell you it's in Lacey.
Okay.
And you can look at it, look for our schedule at meetup.com under our local name, Capital Scotch and Whiskey.
Okay. And now, can people to your Facebook page? Can people find a link to that meetup page?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for
All right.
bringing that up.
Okay. So we're going to tag in this event. We will tag the whiskey people in this post. So look in the show notes down below, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on Facebook, whichever way you watch this, or if you're on the nerdsdrinkwhiskey.com page. Look in the show notes and go to the Whiskey People and check it out. And and even if you are one of those other whiskey podcasts that nobody should watch, they should only watch this one. Educate yourself and learn more. So thank you very much for being part of this.
Thanks, Gabe.
Ken, thank you very much. Go watch Penny Palabras and Dead Drift on Amazon Prime.
Thanks for having me.
And Gabe?
Please like, comment, and subscribe for more, you guys. Thank you very much for watching Nerds Drink Whiskey.